dependency injection inversion of control container I use is Castle Windsor. So don't do Castle Core. If you select Castle Windsor, it will install Castle Core for you. So that's part of the package. Then Rhinomox, it just showed up there when I typed Castle. We'll use that for our mocking framework. I still use InUnit for unit tests, so grab InUnit. And then I used to always write my own should assertion statements. So there's a neat one called shouldly. If you just type should, you can pick whichever one you want. There's different ones. I like shouldly. You can look up the project. All it is some helper assertion methods. So it even pops up the README on it. It just says like this is how you do this. These are what you can call should be, all that stuff. So it just makes it a little bit easier. You know what? Let's just do this. Just because I want to show you how to do this. Okay. So you go into online templates, right? Search Caliburn. Hopefully it comes up. Yeah. So they've already got some. I don't think anyone does Windows Phone 7, but choose this one. This is the one I was talking about. So Castle Caliburn EF5 mashup. We'll do this one here, and then I'll import it into Visual Studio. Okay. What I do like about this template is when it pops up, when it gets there, it goes ahead and creates your folders for you. See that? Creates the view models, views, lib, models folder. That's what you should do anyway. So instead of having to go do that by hand, it creates it for you. And it even puts the view and the view model in the appropriate folder, right? Y'all want me to turn on this microphone or can y'all hear me? Is it fine? All right, so we'll just close this. Let's see. We'll just open this one. You can easily open up a Visual Studio 2010 project in 2012. So just open this up. Cool. Okay, so it goes ahead and extracts this out for you to folders. This is what you should be doing. The only folder I would like to add, 2 folders really. So if you come in here and do, so Alt Insert, if you'd like ReSharper, make a test folder. One more. Just call it, not inside there, sorry. Delete that, go up to the top and do Alt Insert. That's a ReSharper command. And call this data layer, data, whatever you want to call it. Okay? So let's look at what it offers to begin with. So if we just run this. Oh, come on. I did F5. Oh, I did F4. Oops. So just to start off with, okay. All it does is create a main window for you, and there's a text field right here. So let's go look at that. There's a view model. It created a view model for you, and he went ahead, the maker of the template went ahead and made a property on the view model called title. And in the constructor, he set it to something. So that's what you're seeing. So if you go to the view in the XAML, notice he has this text block, X name. This is a Caliburn.Micro convention, this X colon name equals. What it's going to do, what Caliburn.Micro is going to do is look for a property on the view model called title. and it's going to bind to it, right? So let's just delete all this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and copy the XAML that I had in the project I already made, because I really don't want to create this whole thing again. We're really not here for XAML anyway. It's pretty simple. I'll go through it. So this is my CRUD app. It's really horrible looking. You should never make an app look like this, but this is for demonstration purposes only. So on the left side, you can add employees, and it'll have a drop down of occupations. That right side, you can add occupations. So what we want to do is, you want to be able to add an occupation when you press the add button there, and then that combo box should update to show the new occupations that you've added. All right? So let's run this. Okay, so there's no occupations, right? Okay, so software dev 1 showed up. Cool. Let's open up Visual. SQL Server 2008. Entity Framework code first, or really Entity Framework 5, but Entity Framework 5 code first. I didn't have a database. In fact, I pulled this solution down from GitHub because I made it at work, and I just ran it there, and it just created that database up there. Okay, so if a database doesn't exist, or if you don't, in the setup of your, if you don't direct it towards a database or point it towards it, it creates one. So it named it our solution, the data layer, and then the context I called it, and that's the name of the actual database that it created, right? So open it and you can see the tables. So there's that software dev we added. There's me, okay? All right, so we'll do this as quickly as I can in this solution, okay? So let me copy and paste that. What is it? Control. Okay, so I'm not going to retype all this XAML, but basically, I don't know, can you move that? There we go. Okay, so let's see if it's going to complain. Cool. All right, so it doesn't do anything, and this is kind of cool. Caliburn.Micro, if it can't find the method or the properties, it doesn't throw an exception or something. If you don't have properties or methods that are wired up in the XAML, nothing happens. So that's maybe good or bad, however you see it. Okay, so let me, just because of our restricted space. For buttons in Caliburn.Micro, the easiest way to bind them, notice I clicked on that add. See, it's highlighted this add new person. That X:\name in Caliburn.Micro, I called add new person. What it's expecting is a method, right? So create a method. It's got to be public. So just to prove that this works. That's cool, huh? I didn't have to do anything. I just set the X name to something. It found a method that was named that. You can do all kinds. You can add parameters and all. You can do whatever you want. So it's pretty flexible. I think that's cool. Before you had to do the whole command pattern and that was ridiculous. Okay.
It's just going to reflect into the model, the view model.
Well, Caliburn.Micro is just binding your view to things it finds on the view model, right? So the view model itself is just a class. There's nothing. The whole purpose behind model view model is that it's just a class. It doesn't have any knowledge of the view. Other model view architectures, some of them know about the view. MVC, I think, knows about the view. But model view model, the idea is you're totally abstracted all the logic to a class that can then, you can take that class out and put it in another, you know, you can unit test it in another library or whatever. So anyway, so add new person, okay?
As well as matching up the view and the view model because they're named.
Right. Caliburn.Micro, if I name this shell 2 view model, let's just go ahead and do it just so it'll blow up. Caliburn.Micro just says I can't find the shell 2 view or view model, or shell 2 view cannot be found, right? Okay. So it uses a convention. It's convention over configuration. Unless you want to configure it, you can configure it all you want. You can tell it what naming conventions you want to use. But out of the box, it's shell view and then shell view model. What it does is for every view you create, it tries to tag model onto the end of that and try to find that class, and that's how it binds it. So there's no reason not to use that out of the gate, right? I've never.
You have 2 views.
They can share a view model. I did that actually.
You have to tell it which one to start up with when you start your program.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I did, but I had 2 views. I either had 2 views or I had 1 view and I had it dynamically changed based on like the logic. So it's like 1 view and then I could swap out the screen. It has a screen property where you can literally just swap out screens. It's pretty awesome. So, all right, so we need to grab all of these properties. So I just remember what they are. So they're, let's go ahead and put them on here. I also like this with ReSharper. If you do this, it'll create a property with a vacuum field for you. I'll also do, this is even cooler. I love this. It'll do this for, this is what Caliburn.Micro uses. That notified property change lambda expression name. ReSharper will do that for you. You might as well do that by default for your properties. This is cool, and this is out of the box too for validation. So notice this age text box. There's nothing you can really tell it to say like it needs to be an int, right? That would be validation you'd have to do on your end. But if you go into the view model and you make the property like an integer, and then you come in here and run it, turns red. Right? So it's like an easy validation to get from the start. You can, there's a really good tutorial on how to do pop-up validation to where once it turns red, a little bubble pops up and says you need to make this a number. I literally search Caliburn.Micro validation. So out of the box, it'll do that for you. If you start typing something and it's not the type of the property that you're bound to, I think that's cool. Okay. So the combo box, this is where it gets a little bit trickier. It's not that bad though. So the combo box. You set the item source and the selected item by hand. I couldn't get it to work through the convention mode for whatever reason. We can try it, but I couldn't get it working, so I got it to work in doing this. And I think the reason is I went ahead and bound it to occupations as a type and not a string. So it's actually binding to an observable collection of a type, right? One of my domain types. So notice I set the item source to occupations and selected occupations. So with Caliburn.Micro, before Caliburn.Micro, you did public observable collection. Caliburn.Micro has a wrapper around that called bindable collection, and it wants a type. So we're going to create a type called occupation. Doesn't exist, and we'll call this. It was occupations, right? It has to be whatever it was. So we'll have ReSharper create us a type. It sucks because let's see, I think I can do it. Control Shift R. Yeah, so move this to another folder. So move it to the models folder. This is all ReSharper. Okay. So it moved occupation to the models folder. So there it is. Oh. There it is. Okay. So that's your first domain type. What was the other one? It was a selected. So make a property for a selected. So occupation, selected, occupation, occupation. You need to have that notify property change, because when you change the selection in your combo box, it needs to fire this off to say that the selected occupation has changed. Or if you change the selected occupation in code, it'll update the view by doing this. Okay. So what was left? We got all three of those. We got the button. So let's move over here. And this one I call job title. And the button was add new occupation. Prop. That's Visual Studio. Okay. And the last one is public void add new occupation. Okay. Cool. So we can't do anything yet. So let's see, 627. I don't think I'm going to have time to do unit tests. It would just take too long. So we'll go ahead and create the data layer. So come in here, do alt insert. Let's go ahead and create an interface. And we'll call it I employee. I don't know why I'm looking at that. Repository. Okay. This is the start of kind of like a simple repository pattern. The repository pattern has 100 different variations. I don't even think it's a pattern really anymore. Everyone has their own version of it, but ours is going to be so simple that it's going to have add new person or add new employee. Every sharper's trying to get smarter. And this doesn't exist, so use ReSharper. Just create a class. Good enough. Do Control Shift R. Move it to the folder, the models folder. Thank you. Why is it doing some bug in Visual Studio 2012? So the other one would be void add new occupation, right? And I can imagine the other one we would need to do to get that combo box to fill those occupations would be like a get, right? So it'd be IEnumerable occupation get all. Cool. So that's it. So let's create an instance of iEmployee repository. Use ReSharper. Implement all your members. Who's not using ReSharper? Is there a reason? Or do you use CodeRush?
I don't even have Visual Studio. I have a Visual Studio Express and mostly use Sharptober to.
I mean, I'll give Visual Studio 2012 credit. It did add a lot. But I don't know how I could do all of this without ReSharper. So that's it. That's all we need, right? So let's go back to the view model. And again, we haven't even done entity framework yet. So the view model is going to need an instance of that repository. So if you're doing it the correct way, you'll create a read-only employee repository.
That's your constructor injected repository.
Correct. So why is it made read-only? Why are you supposed to make it read-only?
You're gonna say it wants your constructor to be.
I didn't know that for the longest time. I was doing that off an example. I was like, what does read-only mean? Oh, that makes sense. So if you use ReSharper again, if you do alt insert, you select the constructor, say you want to inject the repository, it does it for you. Okay, so that's the standard pattern. The reason you don't inject any of this other stuff because those aren't dependencies. That employee repository is a dependency. Okay, so what we need to do is, well, we could do add new person, we could do get all. How about what we'll do is we'll call get all. And so first off, we need to set that that bindable collection, that occupations. Let's set it as, and then make it a. Yeah, probably a backing field. Okay, so in here, just go ahead and do up the occupations. Just make it a bindable collection. The reason I like the bindable collection wrapper around observable collection, if you don't inject it with like your IEnumerable, like our occupations, you can do it afterwards, right? So you don't have to inject that. You would say like var all occupations equals employee repository get all occupations, right? Then you can, with bindable collection, it has a method on it. Called add range. Observable collection doesn't have that. I don't know if you didn't notice that. So with an observable collection, either at initialization of the observable collection, you have to throw it into the constructor, or you have to do a for each over that and throw each method in. So bindable collection is a Caliburn.Micro wrapper around it, and it lets you, I don't know, I just use it. He recommends using it if you're using the framework to use bindable collection instead of observable collection. Bindable collection inherits from observable collection. So, yeah, that's not supposed to be there. Okay. Now, we need to finish the data layer. So, here's where Entity Framework comes in. So what you do is you go to NuGet and you type in Entity Framework. Actually, it comes up as a second thing. The version, current version's 5. You don't want anything below that, ever. Ever. It was horrible before 4.3. It was pretty bad. 4.2, what was the magic
4.3.1.
unicorn?
4.3 sucked. 4.3.1.
Yeah. There's some version that Scott Hanselman calls the magic unicorn.
That was
when
4.3.1.
when it just, and I was using it before that, and I hated it so bad. And then
Magic Rainbows and Unicorn
yes,
version.
and I was like, this is
Yep.
the greatest thing that's ever happened. So just install it, okay?
It poops awesome.
Cool. Now, all you need to do, and this is why it's so awesome, is come in here and make a context class. So we'll call it employee context. You make it inherit from DB context. Okay? Then you make a DB set of your entities. What's our entities in this case? Employees, right? You could do a DB set for occupations, but you don't need to do that because every employee is going to have an occupation, right? So you make a public DB set of type employee. No. Thanks. Right? And just call it employee context. Is it? Oh, it's get in center. Sorry. really, to be honest, that's all you have to do. And then you just gotta start using your domain models. And then there's some caveats about relationships and stuff, but it is pretty shocking how little you have to do with Entity Framework 5. Okay, so we didn't even finish what is in employees, so, sorry. Yeah, I can't do F12 on the Mac. Sorry. Go to definition. Okay. So, the first caveat you have to know is every one of your domain types, you need to give it an ID. The convention is just call it ID. I think they let you do employee ID, and it parses it and finds the ID. But what I do is this. I create another type, interface, and I just call it iEntity. And just give it a int ID. Okay. Then make all your okay. That could probably just be a
Will it work if you use a different, like you use a GUID or a Int64?
I don't know.
Yes.
Yes, it will.
The identity generation for GUIDs doesn't work. You still have to hook a creation pattern for it. But you can tell it it's computed if you're delivering it from the database, or you can tell it that it's supplied if you're delivering it in code. Now, if you set it to a long, it just sets the type on the canary and it does identity inserting for you.
Okay. So go to the occupation. Make sure this guy has inherits from iEntity. Just needs to be an auto property. There's no reason to make it a getter and setter. The only thing it had was a name, right? Okay. And since an occupation has many employees, an employee can have, there can be many employees for one occupation. The occupation doesn't need to know, right, about the employee that owns it, right? So the employee needs an occupation. So there's a caveat, and I can't explain it very well, but I think you have to mark everything virtual. Is that true?
Nope.
Okay, maybe you don't. I did this really complex graph, and it got to the point where I think the only way I had it working was some of the properties had to be virtual.
Marking collections virtual helps with the caching and identity generation.
Okay.
If you want to be able to do lazy loading, it requires virtuals, but other than that, fine.
Okay.
That's for the castle laser. That's for castle laser, correct? No, that's for,
No, it's
using
in any
a
framework.
dynamic proxy to do lazy loading, which is why it requires the virtual.
So this would be all you would need, occupation, right? Because every employee is going to have an occupation. So save that. Go back to our, did I even create the repository yet? I think I did. Okay. Here's the finish of the program. So when we add a new employee, add a new occupation, and get all occupation. So let's add a new employee first. First thing in this repository you would need would be that context, right? So just create a private DB context. And actually employee context, sorry. It can be DB context, doesn't matter. Just go ahead and new it up. In reality, yeah, you'd want to inject it into the constructor and hide DB context behind the I've read your book. Hide DB context behind the IDB context so you can do proper TDD and unit testing. But this works for the short term, right? So this is why it's so awesome, because all you have to do is say entry, give it the entry, and it's looking for that type, right? So you give it the new employee. State. So look at the choices you have. If you set it as modified, it's telling Entity Framework that this thing already exists, but I'm modifying it, right? So change it where it exists. If you set added, even if it already exists, it's going to try to add that employee. So obviously, if this is a function called add new employee, that's all we want it to do, right? This is important. For the occupation of that employee, an employee is not going to be allowed to add an occupation. Maybe you could have a business rule where they're filling out their form and they can create one on the fly, but for this demonstration, its occupation state equals unchanged, I guess. I've modified, I don't think would do anything, would it? It wouldn't add it. So I think I just set it as unchanged.
There is an easier way. Off of context, just dot employees dot add or dot set of employees dot add.
Yeah.
It'll take care of that for you.
But the occupation though, don't you have to set the occupation? Otherwise it adds duplicate occupations when you would add that employee. That's what I ran into.
If
when I
the
was-
occupation has an ID,
Yeah.
it'll detect it and won't add it. If it doesn't have an ID, it'll create it.
Okay. So, let me just cheat real quick and make sure we go to what I did in this one. Yeah, okay. So the contact or the occupation, you do the same thing. And this is how easy it is to get all of them. That's it. That's how to get all the occupations out of the database. Is just say your contact set occupation. Alright, so, did I call this something different? Yes, I called it mashup, so it will create another database. Let me make sure I have everything set up. So add new person isn't doing anything yet. Let's go ahead and add that in. So, employee, should be add new employee, but it will. Would be the name field, right? Age would be the age field. Occupation would be the selected occupation field. Okay. Go do the same thing for this. I call it a job title. Now you wouldn't set the ID because you don't have an ID. You get the ID from the database, so you wouldn't be setting the ID if you're creating like a new entity, right? May not work. We'll see what happens. Okay, so here's where Castle Windsor, totally forgot about that. So Castle Windsor comes in the bootstrapper. So I'm going to just copy and paste. And the reason I do copy and paste is because I use this same bootstrapper for all my projects for Castle Windsor. So just go ahead and copy it. I actually grabbed this from a guy on GitHub gist. And it was literally like how to use Castle Windsor with Caliburn.Micro. So yeah. Oh wait, I gotta do that one in a minute. Let's go up here. Yes. selector? No.
Your component's the wrong component.
The view model?
No, the keyword component is
Ah.
bound. Type, there you go.
And it needs this extension method. I don't know why I just uncoded it. Okay, so I'm registering that. The reason it threw that error, because if you go back to the view model in here, well, see this bootstrapper, when you give it a like your starting view model, it news this up. And if you don't have a in C#, if you do not have a parameterless constructor, it's going to throw an error. You can't new up a type that I made a set constructor, right? So what Castle was trying to do, or Caliburn.Micro was trying to do, was find that, and since it didn't have it, it said like, oh, you don't have a parameterless constructor, so it should work now. Okay. So let's see first if we can add database. You know why? Because we did not in the add new occupation. So what we should do is clear the occupations. And this is probably a better way to do it, but. You know what? So go to the occupation, why that didn't work. Go to occupation. We need to override the string method. Turn name. Okay, the reason why you have to override the toString method to get that to work, if we look at our XAML, in the binding of that combo box, that selected item, Caliburn.Micro is looking for the toString version of whatever that selected item is.
Their display name binding.
I mean, usually you make it a string, right? Like you'll make it an IEnumerable, a string, you'll bind to a observable collection of strings, so you don't have that problem.
One thing to say, Caliburn, where sometimes you can bind not only the data that's behind it, but also the name.
Display number binding.
Yeah, you probably can. I'm just saying, by default, if you just say selected item and my selected item was selected occupation, it's looking for the toString method of it to put in the combo box. So it did put it in there. You saw it like print out that whole type. But anyway, so that's it. That was the whole talk, and it's 6:45. So, John,
Yeah.
if you want to talk, anyone have any questions?
I guess just an observation, I work with Todd a little bit, I tend to prefer, I guess, a richer model to in a sparser model or situation. That tends to apply, all that stuff goes into the model. It seems to clear.
As opposed to what? I don't know what I did wrong.
So if you have your models will tend to inherit from, say, the property notification.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for right now, the view model isn't doing property notification, right? But when if you're doing a real application and you have these types that the view model is handing back, those are going to be property change based, right? So the reason you do that is so you don't have 50 freaking properties in your view model.
I
Right.
think I found one or two instances, like you've got a specialized property or something.
Yeah.
that you use it.
Yeah. So yeah, this is just pure example. This is not what.
It's demo code.
Yes.
Demo code in a world that never has to go to prod.
Right.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I love demo code.
All right. Thanks.
Looks like all the programmers I know only write demo code though.
I'm
Because
just saying,
that's all
when's the
there
last
is.
time you got woke up at 2 AM because your demo code failed?
Exactly. I don't care. John, go ahead, man.
Guys, how we doing? I'm John Zymek. Met most of you before. I'm with Whitaker IT. We are one of the main sponsors here of the C# Users Group. I'm not sure if you guys are too aware, but the market is really heating up, especially now compared to the first quarter. There's a lot of action out there right now. And if you're in a full-time role, you're in a contract role, you happen to be thinking about making a move, I really would suggest having a look right now. The best time to get a job is, or to at least look for a job is, well, while you have a job. Heck of a lot better than on the other side when you don't have a job, right? Having been there, that sucks, and I'm sure a few of you have experienced that yourselves. Anyways, we have a couple of openings right now with some of our clients. One in particular just came out today is for a full-time senior .NET web application developer, focusing on ASP.NET, and a couple other mid-level roles that are local, and certainly would like to speak with any of you if you're interested in any of these, or some things that may be coming up. I'll be here, give you my card, let's have a conversation. And again, those of you I have not met, certainly looking forward to it. Thanks again, Mark.
Thanks,
And
John.
by the way, guys, there's food back there from Jimmy John's. Enjoy.
Yes, go get food.
Food.
What do I have to do to get a power supply like that?
This, this is a, from China.
That's not a
Not
mouse,
Apple.
John.
Not Apple.
This is a mouse.
Hey, glad you could make it, Pete.
Well,
How's it going?
Well, no, I was thinking it was
I
like
didn't,
an
I,
Apple one that was
I didn't
broken
see
out
you
more
over there.
I didn't, you know, I didn't see you until I came in
It's not the
and
one
sat down.
This is Brian.
Hi, Brian. Buddy John. Yeah, no, I've been this is like my second time attending this.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I'm recording this for my buddy that couldn't make it.
Good idea. Hey, you know what?
Yeah.
I didn't.
I was gonna